Randomly with Ronnie Jr.
Hey, so we got Peppermint hanging out. Peppermint, I want you, if you can, to do, hello, I want you to do your introduction because you do have multi-hyphenated slashes. So tell me how you step into the world.
I'm Peppermint. I am a very nice gal.
That's all you need to know, unless you're paying me. Right. The reality is Peppermint is such a presence. You know, I think there's so many places to go, but for me, it's you were a presence in New York City, in the nightlife entertainment that really was doing your own thing, very independent. What were those moments like? Tell everyone what you were doing as far as a performer and what your ultimate goals were during that time. I feel like that like 2004 through 2010 was Peppermint time, and you look to be enjoying every aspect of it.
I'd like to still think that I am still enjoying every aspect of it. Yeah, you know, I think I moved to New York City in the late 90s and was just had several years to practice in the nightclubs as a baby queen before I was sort of thrown into the national spotlight. I had music videos on the Logo channel, which at the time only played music videos. And now they're known for RuPaul's Drag Race, but before that, they were just showing kind of like whatever they could. Yeah. So they agreed to put my music video on the air. And so that gave me a national platform, even before things like RuPaul's Drag Race. And so I was invited to not only perform and travel to clubs in the US, but also internationally. And so between 2004 and 2005, I was releasing new music, I was traveling, I had dancers, I had a band, and I was just kind of getting myself in a bunch of different things. I think, if it's okay, one of the ways that I remember first meeting was on a kind of a promotional activation where there were some other drag queens, Manila from Drag Race, wylf from Drag Race, and a couple other girls. And that was our first time meeting. That was, I don't remember, that was probably like 2010.
You are 11, yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, that was like I was able to do a lot of different things because of the kind of the work that I put into my drag. There are some queens who like just throw on some makeup and go to the club and go home, maybe have a drink or two or three. But I was really interested in kind of seeing how I could do more with my drag. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant, but I was getting more opportunities, and a lot of them were more and more during the daytime. Like, you know, here I am, a queen from the club, but I'm going down to the MTV headquarters to drop off my beta tape for my music videos. And there was more than one that I was doing that. So I got a relationship with them. Yeah. And then I'm doing all these other events and things that have nothing to do with nightlife or gay nightclub stuff.
So you're like a brand ambassador in those moments, or basically, right?
Yeah, a little bit of a brand ambassador. It was a shoe company that we were doing something for, if you remember. And I was getting more and more opportunities like that. And so I think it was not only, obviously Drag Race has certainly kind of made everything in Technicolor, but even before Drag Race, I think people were starting to realize that drag queens, and people who did drag were talented in so many different areas that you could kind of, you know, utilize them not only at the bar, but also during the day, at an event, in a commercial, as a brand ambassador, doing some type of promotional activation where they're like standing on the corner and talking about your products. And so there ended up being so many different opportunities and places where I could at least have a platform. And that was really interesting to me.
Going back to that time, it was an event that Peppermint was she was the talent. I was working in the production side. I was working a lot of transportation at the moment. And this was like right when I moved to New York. You know, it's such a great time to even think back to, because so much has changed. You were talking about sort of getting out the nightlife stuff. Not that you didn't continue it, but like now MTV, everyone's like looking how they could infuse drag queens into their product. You know, this was a Cole Haan promotion for the Chelsea pump. I remember it as if it was yesterday. But what's so interesting and warm-hearted about you was you were essentially, I think we worked about 5 days together, you and I. Willem was also in our transpo vehicle as well. And it was so many great things we'll attribute to this, but it was such a welcoming to New York City. So you really were one of the first people I knew. And I just really had this a bit fish out of water component, you know, like, whoa, New York is just different. And then I'm like hanging out with like a drag queen events. And then I think it was such a blessing that I had you and Willem, you know, as my people.
Now, here's a little quandary, riddle mystery. Why does peppermint smell like cinnamon?
Because every time I wear peppermint fragrance, people say, girl, who's wearing Vicks Vapor Rub? Not cute.
I remember saying and realizing and learning and knowing that nobody does like Peppermint. Like Peppermint, whatever she does, like she puts it down. And I remember saying, oh, Peppermint, will you do this show, Drag Race? And I remember it was in its 4th season. And you had said, I don't think I'm going to at that particular time. So I was just wondering where your mindset was at with this, where you're like a actual credible in the streets, you know, in the clubs, drag queen performer.
In the streets.
Yeah. Like credibility, like resume, check it out. You know what I mean? You are the Naomi Campbell to the drag performer world at that time. And I was like, oh, Pep, will you do the show? And I don't think you said no, but I know there was something there. And I just want to know what your mindset was around that time.
Well, I think, honestly, you know, it was a different time. I think that's the easiest way to say it. It was a different time. I was at a different spot in my career. The show was at a different spot. Drag Race was at a different kind of spot where it's become even more popular than it was even then. And it was already in its 4th season. So it was obviously a hit then. And so I think at that time, I was one of the things that was in its 3rd and 4th season, one of the things that they were giving to the girls, what you get out of being on the show essentially is the opportunity to tour. And at the time, the big opportunity was doing the Absolute Pride Tour every summer. That was kind of part of the prize, in addition to the cash prize, which had started out at like $25,000, which is a lot of money, but now it's even more. And so at that moment in time, you know, it was really the opportunity to earn a little bit of cash, earn some money, and go on a tour in the summer for touring around and doing different prides. Yeah. And there really weren't the endorsements, there weren't the, you know, sort of big opportunities that are happening these days. That at that point in time, it was pretty much that. And I was actually, to be honest with you, I was kind of already doing that.
Like,
I was already traveling the world. I was already doing internet. I was going to do shows in other clubs in other countries, where at that time, what's that, 2012, 11, 12, a lot of Drag Race queens were not doing. They were mostly doing the Pride tours, the Absolute Pride Tour in the United States. And I was still headlining New York Pride, and I never even saw any Drag Race queens anywhere around there.
Yeah.
And so the things that I sort of had my mindset on, Drag Race didn't quite crack those things yet. It wasn't until later on, a couple of years later, and it felt like it happened like lightning, where I was talking to some club people and about work and potential work that I was trying to get, and I noticed that the questions slowly went from, oh, you work in New York, we go to New York all the time, we love New York queens, we'll hire you. It went from that to, what season of Drag Race were you on?
Yeah.
And so I started to realize the industry changed. It wasn't so much my mind that changed. I still would like to have not have had to have gone on the show.
Good experience, but yeah, that's speaking to the idea that like people don't realize back in that, you know, from the late 90s to those mid 2000 moments, you know, she's you know, hitting everywhere and doing those world travel. And then gets to a point, like every industry, I related to what I've done in radio. It's like, you know, you look at my demo, you look at the resume, it's pretty strong. And then it really turns into, but how are your numbers on Instagram? I mean, that's not the same thing, but it's that. But I sympathize because I've, you know, of course I care for you and I watch tons of your interviews or whatever, but I do remember you speaking once before about that moment where like, I can't get booked now because the only thing that's giving credibility for, you know, working these events are, well, what season were you on? And by the way, no knock to some of the girls, but some of the girls on the seasons, some of the seasons don't really do that well. So to have to compete with that, Pep, like that's, I guess that is what somewhat did lead you to the show. And, you know,
Yeah.
for someone like me who does remember, you know, cackling with you, you know, we had a great time, you know, at the event that we worked. I was really excited to see you do the show. And I was so excited that you dominated as you did throughout the season and kept it real and didn't let the reality TV, you know, the fabricated drama that could come for some of the girls. You seem to just like nose down and take it to the final. I thought you was going to win. No, not to we love, you know, Sasha Velour, but I thought you were going to win for sure when you did the little Janet Jackson dance moves. Like I was, this is our drag race winner. I thought for sure.
You know, it wasn't until, I mean, that looking back, you know, and I can certainly understand that perspective, and I was obviously rooting for myself. But yeah, I was sweating bullets taping, which I'm sure most of the girls feel like, because you don't know, you know, it was my first time ever doing reality. I felt like a fish out of water, very different than how I would feel in New York City. And I mean, I just swore I was going to get sent home in some weird, bizarre twist every week. And so I was trying my best to be on top of my game. And if I couldn't be on top of my game in the challenges, which a lot of times those challenges on Drag Race, you can't control it. Like they're like, try to, you know, make something happen, turn water into wine. Like sometimes it's just not possible. And then the camera's there to see how you fail. Mm-hmm. And so, but the thing that the fail safe for me was always going to the lip syncs and kind of going to the stage. And so I luckily was able to kind of just rely on being able to save myself in those moments. And it wasn't until halfway through the season that I was like, you know what, I think I have a good shot at this, because now there's more than half the girls are left, or less than half the girls are still remaining, and I'm doing pretty good. And so I just got stronger and stronger. And then of course my confidence, you know, grew. And then here we are, there we were at the finale, and it was just me versus Sasha Velour. And I was like, oh my gosh, I swear if I had I mean, Sasha is amazing, and yep. I think everything worked out the way that it was supposed to. But something makes me think that if I had also had a mask that came off or rose petals, then I may have also, you know, I could have won. And
I don't know.
You never know.
Well, what you did with the skirt and the kitten wig, I mean, I think that really was something, you know, worth remembering. It was fantastic. But, you know, these types of shows, it's like one of those things. You go back to like the early MTV days, or not early, but mid MTV days, and you have the VJ contest, and the freaking, you know, the Jesse ends up winning, but the Dave Holmes has the career that we all know. So like you were the second place, but you still, you know, will continue to have a career, as will Sasha. So being second place is really fantastic. But God, to be so close, it's like, because they filmed 2 alternate endings. So you sort of already filmed you being a successful, like, the winner, right?
Yeah, I would really like to have that for my scrapbook, footage of me winning the crown, you know, for my video scrapbook. It would be awesome to release that at some point.
Yeah, well, I want to see it too, because I want to see like what you said, you know, like Violet had that come through moment. I'm like, what would have Peppermint, like how she would have honored the experience, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. I want to talk about how New York City has played a role in you being such a fierce performer, but like to be a great performer is one thing, but to like have the business sensibility, you know, we all know being in New York City that keeps you on your toes. You know, you and I both, you know, on the Uptown A, you know, 145th style, like we, you know, it's just tell me about why New York was the place you had to be, even beyond coming to the city in '99. So what was the attraction initially to the city, and just speak to how great it is?
Well, I actually came to New York City in 1998. I think New York City, for me at the time when I moved to New York City, it just really represented a change from, you know, a smaller town back home. And my sights were actually Philadelphia. That's where I really wanted to move. I applied to college in Philadelphia, and I didn't get into art school in Philadelphia, but I got into art school in New York. So I was like, well, I guess I'll go to New York. And so at the time, had I had my choice, I probably would have moved to Philly, which is still one of my true loves. I think it's a wonderful city. And I think in a way it's kind of a smaller, like little kid sister to New York City. I remember just wanting to be around queer people, around a mix of different types of people that were artistic and creative, and also mixing that with an opportunity to perform was what I wanted to do. So initially I was trying to do that in Philly. It didn't work. And so I moved to New York. And when I first moved to New York, I was so depressed. I mean, I remember my very first day, I got into my college dorm, my family dropped me off, and then like, they just were like, okay, love you, all this noise, commotion, and then they closed the door and it was like silence.
Wow.
And it was that weird silence that wasn't really silent because like I could hear like the buzzing of the electric like light above my head. You could hear like the sounds of New York City, but it was like so lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, it wasn't my favorite place the first night. But then of course, being in a creative environment, going to art school, being around dancers and actors and things, I was able to kind of really make myself at home. And it really wasn't more than a couple of weeks before I was like, okay, what else can we get into? That's when I discovered New York City nightlife, and then everything, the rest is history.
Yeah.
I got into the nightlife scene and was able to work. I was working at the Tunnel primarily, but I worked at Limelight and you name it, I was there. If it was open, I was at the club. And so that was my main kind of source, because I even realized then I went to school for acting and musical theater to basically be on Broadway. And I realized, or it was apparent to me at the time, that even then, who I was and kind of what I was serving wasn't really what they were looking for on Broadway at the moment.
Mm.
And so really like gay bars and clubs and drag was my real outlet. And one of the things that
you almost let the work speak for itself, because you know that it'll be received in a different way. There's less red tape maybe with the nightlife. Is that kind of what it is?
Well, definitely there's less red tape, or a different kind of tape. It's more of a transparent tape compared to, let's say, Broadway or other things. But one of the things that was really cool that I noticed about New York was I was at the club, and the club was the great equalizer. We were all there at the club, but I was meeting people that were in the club, people that were, other actors, other singers and dancers, musicians. I was meeting people who were painters and visual artists. I was meeting people who were chefs, who were in the cooking and they were into fashion, and people who were mechanics. Honestly, every walk of life, and we were all in the club. And this person in the corner is wearing a green wig and is a fabulous queen, but they're also a lawyer during the day. And so people were bringing all of these different skills into nightlife. And that was one of the things that I really thought was cool about New York City nightlife and New York City drag, was that you get, of course, there's queens that are lip sync, assassins, or, great dancers. But then there's also people who would just do fashion, who don't perform at all. And I had never seen that before, kind of where I came up and kind of when I started doing drag and back in Philadelphia, everyone kind of had the same cookie cutter. And so it was really interesting to see that there's queens in New York who are doing so well and really making a name for themselves, and they all have these different skills. And that's when I realized New York is kind of a magnet for all of these different skills. And then you end up, since you're in there with each other, you end up acquiring some of these skills that you're sharing kind of through osmosis, and you learn.
Everyone steps up. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think so drag race.
Nightlife. Yeah.
It's kind of a wonderful kind of training ground and proving ground for really honing your talent and honing your skills. I think there's a reason, no shade, but I really do think the current of the flow, the current, it goes from New York to Los Angeles rather than the opposite. I think there's more people going from New York to other places than there are from other places to New York. I mean, in terms of like their final destination.
Yeah,
And so everybody in LA lived in New York at one time.
I think you have to
There's
nurture.
a lot of people in New York who've never lived in LA.
You have to nourish those skills in a place like that. I mean, obviously nowhere near what you're talking about back in the older days, but even just like, you know, me being, when did I get out there? Around 2011, 2012. I always think of like a show like a Keisha Carr's Sunday night show at Industry is like, I've seen it probably like 3 or 4 times. And what is so fascinating is like, you know, Keisha, the bearded bitch, is like when she's performing, I've never seen her at any other venues, but I've seen that specific Sunday night show. And it's so amazing to me because you know that everyone that is there for an 11 o'clock Sunday night show, I think it is, they're there and you see everyone maybe who you know, some Broadway kids, you see some fashion people, like it makes her have to perform at a higher level because it's not just an audience who are like, whoa, I'm buzzed, I want to watch some drag. Like this audience is, I don't know, I always, that's to me one of the greater shows that still does exist in New York City at this point.
Yeah. You see a lot of people from all different walks of life. And like you said, they make you perform at a higher caliber. And even before you get to the stage, just the experience of living in New York City, chances are your apartment is smaller than anybody else's apartment in the entire country. You have, you know, you are trying to pump out the same amount of looks with less resources. And we have more resources in terms of being able to source material and get things from other places and stores and go right down the street. But we have so much less space to kind of literally spread our wings that, you know, I mean, it wasn't, I know there's lots of queens that we hear of today that a lot of the people may know. And I certainly was the only queen at the time that I knew of when I was getting ready and going to my job to get in drag every single week at Lips, 2 or 3 times a week, Lips restaurant. I was doing my makeup on the subway. That was just where I had to do it because it didn't make sense to try to do it at home. I just do it on the subway. Bring your kit, put it on your lap, and just sit in the corner and do it on the subway. And that's like something that most people wouldn't even think of doing or be able to do. But it is, it's really, it made me really quick at doing my makeup.
I do want to get into more Broadway because that was such a moment. I wish it would have continued for a lot longer. We'll touch in a second. But before we end on the Drag Race stuff, because it, you know, it still is a gigantic show and it still does create great joy with everybody. What's interesting about you, and I don't know if anyone else pays attention like I do, but if you look year after year after year after year from, I guess, like Honey Davenport to like Monet or Bob, like everyone who comes on the show before you or after you, it's always like, well, you know, Peppermint was a source of inspiration. Like you really are somebody who gets brought up all the time. I don't think people recognize like what that is, you know? So just talk to me about some of those queens. I personally feel, I love Bob. You know, and I don't know if that's just like drag performer. I don't know if that's also just the, you know, the comedy chops that Bob has. Just talk about like what that feels like to, I don't know if that would be a mentor that you were to these younger queens. Just talk to me about that experience, the camaraderie, the sisterhood.
It does feel like a little bit of either a mentorship, or I definitely feel like an aunt. And I've you know mentioned this about, I mean, gosh, pretty much every Black queen who has ever lived in New York City, as somebody that I've met and I can tell you has been at 1 or 2 of my shows on a weekly basis. And that's because I was really fortunate to be able to hold a spot in New York City nightlife for so many years before Drag Race, and even during Drag Race, I continued doing a lot of my club gigs. And so there's a lot of queens who tell me later on that I was their first drag queen or first drag experience. And those are the ones that I might not even necessarily know very personally, but then the rest of them, you know, I was at many of their first time performing in drag, you know, all of these things.
Yeah.
It does feel good in a way, and it's, you know, I mean, it makes me feel old in another way, but it's great to know that I'm connected to all of these different queens in this way, because to be honest with you, I mean, a lot of people hear now about sort of drag family that kind of also can be connected to ballroom culture and sort of a house mother, and there's a lot of queens who we hear, especially through Drag Race, who are part of a house or a family. And I never really had that. Like, I grew up in the New York City nightlife kind of club world, where there wasn't as much of, for drag, there wasn't as much of an infusion with the ballroom culture at that time. You were just an individual club kid, and you came and you had friends, but there was no like house mother. Nobody was going to show you the ropes, really. You just had to learn and just like learn through the school of hard knocks. And so hearing now that I've influenced other queens, even though I wasn't specifically their drag mother, I've sort of like retroactively adopted them as my nieces.
Yeah.
You know, Monet Exchange is my niece.
Yeah.
Bob is definitely my little cousin.
Two of my favorite. I listen to their podcast all the time, and I think what's interesting about them is, yes, they are, you know, from this gigantic show, and yes, they were so great at it, but I just feel like this is going to be, and much like your career too, it's going to be a little like, you know, years down the road, like a little like, oh, remember when they did Drag Race? But then they also did, you know, in your case, Broadway. And I mean, Bob is hysterical. I often say this, and I don't know if you agree with me. I often say that if they did a winners season of Drag Race, and this is not a knock to anybody, I almost feel like Bob could get at most of those girls. And that's not, I just feel like Bob's personality just seems to be cool as heck. I don't know.
Performance-wise, absolutely, and especially considering the fact that the queens are these days, that most of the looks that the queens give are not made on set. Then definitely, Bob is not really a seamstress, a professional seamstress. Neither am I, but Bob has it down when it comes to. Bob knows how, has become and learned so much about production, about also obviously performance. I mean, when I first met Bob, first time I ever met Bob was her first day performing in drag. And so she's grown a whole lot.
Yeah.
And it's great to see. And so I agree with you. Bob would obviously slay. I hope that they do a winter season.
Yeah.
But I definitely I think they should take a break.
I think you need to, yes, you need to have the audience salivating for the product, I think, at some point. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that was no shade to any of the other great queens. I think.
No, they're all great.
It's just the show itself is an interesting show. And, you know, can you put yourself in that judgmental space again? Can you put yourself into some of the production stuff as far as, you know, not being able to really communicate with your friends or family? Like, some of those other great queens who did so well as the winner, I don't know if they would bounce back. Something about Bob is back to that New York City thing as well. It's the resourcefulness. Like, she gonna Jimmy rig something and make it work. She gonna Jimmy rig a comedy joke if that is necessary. And I love the presence of it. And I always look at Bob as like, oh, wow, I would love to have more of my personality kind of match that. Because, you know, even when I aspire within my radio career and YouTube and stuff of that nature, it's like, Ronnie, don't take yourself so seriously. And I look at somebody like Bob, I listen to Monet Exchange, you know, with sibling rivalry, and I'm like, okay, that's it right there. That's, you know, they're tapping into, let's go, and let's have fun. And that's important. Tell me about the show, the Broadway show. It wasn't a shock to you that it happened, or was it? Because you knew you had the chops, but it still was red tape. Like, tell me about that experience, because you basically did that thing. So that's cool.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, I certainly didn't expect in the middle of at that time and place that I would be on a Broadway show only a year after having left Drag Race. And I was on tour at the time when I got the call to audition. And, you know, I was kind of bitter about it because I didn't really want to leave the tour because I was making some really good money.
Come on.
And so I was like, I don't really know about this, but, you know, my management had said it would be stupid if you don't do it. And obviously I agreed in the end. And it was a great opportunity. It was a good opportunity to not only work on Broadway and become a part of the Broadway family, but also get to know some great performers who are moving on to doing some other great things. Also becoming chummy with the Go-Go's, who are hello legendary. Yes. And so there was a lot of great things about it, and I miss it every single day. You know, I wish that the show had lasted on Broadway longer. And I think when people look at Head Over Heels. A lot of people who were looking at Head Over Heels or reading up about it were people who were Drag Race fans looking at it through a kind of reality TV lens.
Okay.
But in the world of Broadway, we no means we're ahead, but it's respectable if you can last on Broadway for 6 months. You know, it is that brutal. We actually we lasted longer than some people thought we would last. Let's just put it that way. And it was the little queer show that could. It was a great opportunity to not only for me to be on Broadway, but it was an historic moment. There weren't a lot of other queer characters portrayed in the way that we were able to portray them. It was a very body positive show. It was kind of very non-traditional casting in terms of race. And it was also very, like I said, very queer and very open in terms of like having different types of gender and sexuality. You know, it was just honestly, from what I've seen, it was one of the queerest Broadway shows that existed. And I don't know if people were ready for that at the time.
Yeah.
But it really put its money where its mouth is in terms of representation. And it felt really good to be a part of it. And so it's always going to be something very special.
Well, yeah, I mean, then you said Go-Go's music. I mean, who didn't like, you know, so many people who idolize like that, you know, the Go-Go's were everything to a lot of people. So it wasn't a story about them, but that was the music that was intertwined. So it worked out very well. And, you know, it's a really good thing too, Pep, because like you sometimes have to do those projects that like counted for so much. And it just, you know, continues to keep that credibility for, you know, maybe in about 4 years, there's going to be that next show or that next role that's like, okay, she ready to jump up to the plate and swing that bat again, you know. It's, I think that's, I'm glad you did it, but God, what a I didn't know you were dealing with the, okay, I want that tour money though. You know, I didn't know that type of
tour money. There was a lot of hardships. Just being a Broadway performer in general, it's something that I think it's probably best if you have passion for being a performer and being on Broadway. It's going to make your performance better, and it's kind of necessary, I think, to be able to do it. And it's not. There are some things right now that are kind of a machine, and I think it's 80% of the work. It's hard to be on Broadway, period. But there is that kind of machine where you kind of, you know, somebody else starts it for you, and you just okay. All I have to do is this and that, and and I'm just picking up and just continuing what somebody else does. But originating a role is a whole nother story. Opening a show and originating a role is, I think, would be twice as hard. And it's you know, it's really tough. If you have any issue learning any lines, try memorizing an entire script that changes overnight, and you have to do it today, or they hand you your new song and you're on in an hour. It was like that, and it was very tough. But like you said, I'm so glad that I did it, and it gave me another skill that a lot of people don't say they have.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's going to be that notch, and then in 4 years, 2 years, whatever, it's going to be that perfect role. And then that might be a different experience, because you had said a little bit of this show kind of became, you know, the drag audience sort of came to watch. Now, the next show might just be just you know, like this is going to be like the Peppermint the Entertainer, which is so exciting, and I can't wait for that moment. And we know it's going to happen. How do you navigate as the world like is changing in certain levels? You're in the podcast space as well. Like, how are you navigating with those types of things? You've always been in the nightclubs, you know, I'm on the stage, so to speak. Do you enjoy any of this, like the podcasting world? Is it something that you're just trying, or what? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I enjoy doing a podcast, and we're on hiatus from my podcast, It's a Mess, right now with Caswell. I enjoy doing the podcast because it's with him, with Caswell. He's my best friend, and it feels great to do something with him and create something with him. I think one of the challenges that it's tough for me is like reconciling a busy schedule, which I hope to continue to have, with creating a podcast. And it's something that you want to be timely. You want it to come out tomorrow, but you can't because you can't record it tomorrow. And so it's always kind of a struggle for us trying to figure out the right sort of balance in terms of content. But I enjoy the podcast world. It's nice to kind of get into it. It's not the be all end all for me by any means.
Yeah. Well, as long as it's fun, you know, I always remember those like do the right thing, you and Coswell moments. So I feel like it's just an extension of that.
Yes, it is. It's an extension of that. It's the same energy and the same essence that we have. Do the Right Thing was a really long running nightclub evening or party in New York. And it's still going on. You know, we're still the producers of it. It still has our name and it's still happening. Well,
you know, we're moving through these oceans, huh?
Yes, we are.
Pep, can you tell me, because we talk about like, you know, this is the arts, but it's also, you know, business. And so with that, you have some great entertainers, actors, singers, songwriters. But we do know this is a business and sometimes people get lost in the sauce. So my question to you is I want you to tell me two people who like you, I don't want to say are your inspiration to you, but two people that you're like, they're really doing it right. Just something that speaks to you.
You know, okay, so I'm going to go old school a little bit with this. I think one entertainer that I'm surprised to see is still has a space and still creating, and I don't think his name was completely tarnished, was Simon Rex. I don't really know much about him at all, but I know he's been involved in lots of different things. And I think it's really interesting to watch him still continue to create content like he is today with such a past. And I just think I don't know how much I admire it, but I really do think it's a testament to like his work ethic. I watch him, he's the whack. I still like peep in and be like, what's this one up to? He's got it's not my style, it's not my brand, but he really, I can tell how smart he seems to be with just his comedy, with everything that he's doing. And so that's just somebody that's lately been on my mind. In terms of other drag race queens, people that are, obviously it's a little closer to home. Obviously Bob is definitely somebody that I think is using their platform in an excellent and brilliant way. I think Bianca is obviously using it in a great way. One queen that I think that I admire who wasn't on Drag Race is Sherry Vine. She and I are very close friends, and she is a very good businesswoman, and I learned a lot from her consistently.
Pep, I want you to give me any last thoughts of things that you want people to know. And also, because I look up to a J-Lo, can you tell me one nice thing about J-Lo real quick? I just make everyone do it.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the best thing about J-Lo is she doesn't seem to take herself as seriously as the Beyoncés of the world do. And I really like that. She seems to still be able to do it with class. And she's really made a really long career for herself. I remember when she first came out with her first single, nobody thought this girl was going to last. No one. And I'm just really happy to see what she's done with everything. Yeah. And so J-Lo's awesome.
Do you remember the guy who was in the music video? That was Adam Rodriguez from CSI Miami. I guess they used to date. All right.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
You just asked me any J-Lo information. I usually got you locked down. No worries. That'll be my next podcast.
I'll take it.
You know I love her.
And yeah, so I'm just, hopefully people will be able to check out my new music, and I'm always working on new stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't really have any announcements, but I'm really happy that we had a chance to finally sit down and talk.
I know. Huggies through the phone. To the music, does it have a chance to sort of evolve? Because when you did the music before, I feel like you probably, had to keep it in that like logo queer type sound. What do you think when the new music will hit? Will it have similar, or are you going to try to take on a couple different things as well?
Well, I'm always trying to do new things musically, and I think I've always had a really independent kind of approach to it. Like, I'm just going to do what I want because I'm paying for it. And so that's still my approach. But I think this year is going to be more about, really just like the non-drag sort of sensitive side of just bringing my actual life experiences as a trans woman to music, and seeing where that goes in the writing.
Do you, lastly, just because a lot of people still like are not up to speed, is there any information as far as like, just how does that even feel like representing for the trans community? Is that a challenging thing? Because do you ever get like a little like tired of it? And or what are the things that people, because I'll hear people say things that are ignorant, like even just with the gay community or whatever, they don't know that they're saying it. What are some of the things, just as you look a little educational moment, could kind of just put out there that kind of showcase, you know, what's legit, what's kind of, you know, offensive, etc. Tell me a little bit.
Well, I think one thing is important is we can't judge whether someone's trans or not based on how you think they look, whether you think they're passable as a man or as a woman. You know, I think people should get better at asking pronouns and asking how people want to be identified. And if they're not comfortable asking, then just don't assume. And so then you have to get comfortable using kind of gender neutral stuff. I think there's a lot of people, especially some Drag Race fans, who are really used to saying, oh, she's fish, she looks like this, she passes as a woman, she doesn't. Like judging like you are on the judging panel, and you're not.
Oh.
And so I think we have to realize that, like, when it comes to trans people and their lives and their bodies, there's more at stake than just, you know, a Drag Race crown.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the pressure, I mean, honestly, no, I really do feel good about my connection to the trans community, and I'm really happy about it. I'm happy to be able to have a platform that I can speak about the things that I care about. And I guess it's easy, like the activism piece or the advocacy piece kind of comes easy to me because I can see where we need to go, and I'm personally affected by it.
All right, Pep, we're gonna let you go. Thank you, and keep prospering and that beautiful smile. So I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. All right, Pep, thank you.
All right, baby, love you. Thank you.